I did a brilliant video the other day, except no go button. So all of these things have been pre-prepared, not by design. So in our last video, we looked at how to do borders with this shape, using this shape here, and how to do curves. So what I've done with my rerun is use bigger, wider bits for the curves, and then medium bits for the curves, and then smaller bits for the curves. So you can see how you can do all sorts of things with those curves. So for this session, we'll look at how to make these flowers, and yes, you can make all of them, and how to make some just straight tessa. Once you get the hang of them. So let's have a look at this one. We look here and we can see that the end of the plate, just where I've cut the last bit off there, is a little bit thicker, so we'll nip that off first. Curved, it's going to cut in a curve. It's very hard to make that exactly straight because it's not a straight piece. So I've got a little bit of a curve there. If you want to see these in action, I'm currently making challenge number 5 with a starry night, and I'm using this cut for most of the background in the sky, so check that out. So the next bit you do is just cut it long ways in half again, and your last bit in half, and we've got all of this wonderful tess. Great for sticks. If you want squares, just cut them in half. Brilliant. Okay, let's have a look at cutting these petals, because I think they're a good one to start with. Nice and big, and don't have to be overly worried, because I quite like a rough cut. If you like them really smooth, then do the sanding pad, or if you have a grinder, you can grind them off. I don't bother really. We're up to number 4 of the things that we're going to start with in terms of working with crockery. Now, the first cut we want to do are these ones. So you have those in your mind, and you keep these because they are great for the centre of 3D flowers. So don't throw those away. And then we shape the top. It is really easy. You just need to think nibble, nibble, nibble. So, okay, now we'll get onto this one. So we just put it at an angle, so about halfway to about a quarter of the way or a third, depending on how small you want the centre, and give it a good nip. So there's the little stamens for the centre of your flowers. You don't have to waste much with plates. And the other side. And you just trim off any little bits that don't add to the shape of what you want to do. Now, to cut a curve on anything square, whether that's one of these or a vitreous tile, this approach works for all of them. So you start off by cutting the corners off. And I normally do this in my bucket to catch everything. Then you cut the corners off the corners. So here and here. This one and, whoops, I'm making it too small. And then we actually have the petal shape. Turn it around and we have the petal shape. And because I've gone from underneath, the edge is a bit rough. So if you cut it from this side, you're going to get a better view of your flower. You won't have the surface cut. If you don't want these white bits, then just go in a bit further. Cut the corners off, cut the corners off, cut the corners off, cut the corners off, and then cut that point off. And then you'll have one without the rim of the plate on there, which is what I prefer to do. But it's up to you, because some flowers do have white tips, and depending on the shape you're making, depends on whether you want those tips. The rim of a plate, this one is a little cone flower, and they look great in white, or whatever colour you want really, but you'll often see them done in white or yellow, bold in yellow and blue, with a blue. This is just an oval ceramic or you can cut your own ovals. So back to getting our standard shape from which we do all our work from. We can cut that top off now if we want to, and I might do that because it'll show you how different they look on the flower. So this one will probably take 2 cuts. And there we go. Oops, sorry. And there we have it. Now we want to cut it in half. You can use the line if you want, if that's helpful. After a while, you won't need to do any guidelines. You'll just be able to cut them in half. And then we end up with the same thing at the top. And we want to do the same treatment here as we did with the first one. Is cut these little bits off because you'll get a nicer shaped flower. Okay, so I've made this sort of a shape by cutting those off. And if you want them longer, generally from about halfway to the point to get a good shaped flower. And until you get to know the hang of your own cutting, you won't know whether you're going to have 8 petals, 9 petals, 10 petals. You just don't know. And because this is a square bit, we do it the same way as we did the other one. It's pretty cool. Right across the middle there. These are great if you start working with 3D because you have a point to stick into the glue. Now, if I was going to do that, I would want to make that sharp. That way you've got plenty of room for your flowers, petals, and then you have plenty of room for the little stamens that you've been collecting. So now we just cut the corners off in the same way. To learn is the little tiny weeny nips. And this is why you should practice on scungy old crockery before you get into your beautiful plates. And please keep in mind that this plate is actually really good to cut, which helps with the demonstration. I'll also do that great big heavy duty plate so you can see the difference in cutting with something as easy as this. So now I have my pointy one to pop into my flower. I'll just swap this one out. These points work really well if you have a tiny little centre. One thing you can do is actually trim off the points and have maybe a 12mm middle piece, but you'll get a great fit. You just nip off this point here. Just the weeniest nip you can do. And that sits it all the way around. Now I'll do some close-ups and hints and tips about what to think about when you construct your flowers to see. So one thing that's really hard when you first start is actually getting your grout lines small enough, because you think they're small, but they actually can be quite large. So what I do is have a look at your grout packet and see what the smallest grout line is that the grout can deal with. I've got 2 types of grout I use, one that does 2mm to 8 and another that does 2mm to 20 and another that does 1 to 9, and that's the minimum space you need. I go for about 3mm, only because that's the size I really like. Once you've chosen your centre, you make sure these ends of your flowers do the grout line of your choice. So here, I'm using this pokey thing because my hands are wobbly and you'll have conniptions watching me trying to straighten them up. So we get them nice 2mm, 3mm around our centre. Then we look at how many of these, or how wide these grout lines are. So these are good for a flower. So I'm doing here is about, and you don't want anything to touch. As soon as tessera touches, it's something you see immediately because the grout line is interrupted. So then we've got the same space here that we can manage that's like that. Oh, excuse, the magpies are having a little fight in the garden. They were playing a moment ago, if you know what I mean. So where did I get up to? Of course. So if they're too big, you can add a petal, or you can just nip a little bit off each of the sides to make it fit. So you get a great fit for your flower. So I hope you've enjoyed our 6 things to do with the edge of a plate, and that you're inspired to go and make some flowers. As I said, this can be really addictive. The first time I started making flowers was for a mannequin, and I ended up making, would you believe, 250 flowers out of vitreous tiles to cover my mannequin. That was when I very first started. So addicted to anything flowers, anything, well, mosaics, what can I say? Enjoy.